if I'm gonna tap out of the meat suit, I'm gonna do it in some fantastic, glorious way.
With a flap jacket.
Maybe.
All right, so consistency.
Consistency is a big one, right? This is a question. This is easily a top 3 most common question I get asked.
How to stay consistent or how to become
Either,
consistent?
but just around consistency. And part of the reason it's a trick is because you don't get consistent by focusing on consistency. You get consistent by doing the things, supporting the behaviors that lead to consistency. And so a lot of times when people fuck this up, they fuck it up because they're trying to force a particular outcome, not support the things necessary to get the outcome. And that's where things get very irresponsible and you'll do things that aren't sustainable. Does this make sense?
Yeah, it's like Atomic Habits.
Yeah, exactly like Atomic Habits.
Break it down.
It's funny, I was actually just pulling up the cheat sheet of Atomic Habits that I had saved in my mini tabs.
But part of the reason this is important is because it's fundamentally it's very similar to the idea of don't focus on being number one, focus on being the best. If you focus on being the best, more often than not, you will be number one. But there are lots of things you can do to look like the number one team or the number one rep or the number one fill in the blank that isn't sustainable and isn't, in some cases, ethical. You'll look good in the short term, but it isn't sustainable because you're not focusing on being the best, you're focused on an outcome or an image. It's the same thing with consistency. If you're trying to, say, hit particular numbers every single week and you're really focused on hitting those numbers, if you don't have a value-based or skill-based foundation for doing that, you can easily make decisions that make it look like you're consistent that are not sustainable. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's the issue. So if we want to become consistent in an area of our life, we have to do the fucking work, which is, nobody wants to hear that. Like, oh. Like in any area of your life, if you want to be a better partner, a better lover, a better business person, a better leader, you don't get there by feigning a particular level of understanding. You get there by doing the work, and then the natural outcome is consistency.
So what happens when someone just falls off their consistent train?
They're valuing something else more. And that's my entire work. I will spend the rest of my fucking life in this plane, in this realm, helping people become more aware. Because once they're aware, then they can make conscious choices about how to elevate that. But usually when you see people fall off in any area, it's because they're valuing something else more, which that isn't, although it can sound like a judgment, it is not intended to be a judgment. It's simply a spark for awareness.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, what am I valuing more in this moment? And do I want to value that more? Right? And a lot of things we do are programs and they're unconscious, so we don't even recognize we're doing it. And that's where you run into a lot of problems. So for instance, as a really classic example of this, it is hilarious to me how many people I see grow fat together, that get together, right? Like they fall out of shape together. And it's like, well, why is that happening? Well, there's a few potential explanations for it, but at the surface, their intention was to find a partner.
Right.
Once that intention was met, right? In other words, I'm going to put myself in a position in which I look as suitable as possible to find a partner. Once that intention is met, I no longer value the seeking of finding partner because I have partner, thus the behaviors that I was doing in order to get partner, I no longer value.
Right.
And then they grow fat together. Or one grows fat and the other one gets annoyed. And then it's like, classic, right? It's like, again, not judging that, it's just then we may want to become aware of that if we're trying to understand why our system isn't working and why although men get away with this a little bit more than women, which kind of sucks, I think. But I think one of the reasons for that, and you see this a lot, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this, you will almost never see a good-looking guy with a ugly girl, or I hate to say it that way, but like
unattractive.
A girl that isn't at his level of beauty. I guess that's the way of putting that. But it's not uncommon to see girls who are with guys that are kind of like what the fuck? So how do you explain that? Well, it's not a very popular thing to say in our society, but men and women are different. They prioritize different things, right? So women will openly usually admit, although this crew is probably a little bit different, that they would value a dude who is more capable of protecting and providing and make him more attractive in their mind, which is easy for a woman to do. They can literally just, he's good looking, he's good looking, he's good looking, he's
Or
good
they do
looking.
the opposite, where he is good looking but has literally nothing to offer.
Right. Well, that's usually girls'
yeah.
early life.
Yeah.
Right, like, so there was a big study that was done on this, that in short-term mating behavior with women, they will optimize for risk and attractiveness. Long-term mating behavior, they optimize for security and comfort, which that's a more wordy scientific way of saying, yeah, no shit, right? If I'm gonna fuck around, I wanna fuck around with somebody who's hot. If I'm going to find a long-term partner, there are other needs that need to be met. But it is fascinating to see that. It's like, so you'll see guys, and this is where the boy culture comes in right now that kills me, that will try to front that I am provider, protector, and then when they get what they want, it's like, woman, make my dinner, wash my clothes, you go to work, I'm gonna fucking sit here and watch Netflix and play video games, which is the culture that we're dealing with right now with a lot of women who are complaining that there aren't men out there, there's too many boys. It's because they got what they wanted out of it. But anyway, this idea of consistency is really based in value. It's like, well, if you've changed, what are you valuing more now? What has changed in your programming that you're valuing something else differently? And that's the awareness. Once you have that, then you can decide what you want to do with it.
Yeah. We had Ryan Holiday speak at our recent conference, and the question was brought up to him of, hey, if you fall off of your pattern or your routine or whatever, how do you get back on? And I really loved his response in that, like, it's not that you're really falling off, you just have multiple routines or multiple habits like depending on the scenario. So if you're a parent and you have kids, like that's not going to look the same every day, because if you've got a sick kid, that's going to be a different kind of protocol than what your normal, like, get ready for work and go slay the day is going to be like. So that's something that I've resonated a lot with lately. And like, okay, I used to be really great at every morning, get up and go take my dog on a walk and like get some exercise in the morning. And now I'm prioritizing my sleep a little bit more. And I'm like, okay, I just gotta be okay with it. This is the season. I'll be able to get back on it.
And I think the key to that is just being consciously aware of why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then I think that's less of a problem. The issue is when we are totally clueless in our behavior and we're like a dog chasing our tail and then confused why things in our life aren't making sense. We are not aware of why you're doing what you're doing. And that becomes a problem.
I think one of the things that helps is also seeing it visually. Like if you have like a little tally marker, there's this app, it's called Habit Tracker,
Yeah.
and you're able to actually see how many times you did that habit. And it's helpful because if you do fall off once, it is easy to just, I ruined it. Like, well, who cares? Why am I going to do it tomorrow? Or it's hard to stay consistent. But for me, whenever I see, okay, I've done it more often than not, it's way easier to jump back on. It's like a different kind of confidence. Because like, no, I've been consistent. It just happens to be this one time.
Yep.
And I really like that.
Yeah, you're bringing up a really important psychological mechanism in human behavior where, for reasons that aren't fully explained, we desire perfection and outcome. And so then if we make a decision in perfection, it's like, I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week. Okay. Well, that's really, for most people, a really poor goal for somebody who's never been to the gym or hasn't been to the gym in years. It's like the fact that like you're kind of speaking to the ignorance in which you understand fitness if you think you're going to start going 5 days a week and balling out, like not happening. Okay, so but what ends up happening, let's say you went 3 times out of 5. Well, we know statistically you are likely to get negged out that you didn't commit to your goal of 5 enough that it would make you stop altogether,
Yeah.
which is
Right.
really silly. Because if you ask somebody, is going to the gym 3 days a week better than 0 days a week? It's like,
It
yeah,
is.
Mm-hmm.
right? You can, in fact, if you're doing the right kind of workouts, you can get all you need out of 3 days a week.
Right.
Yeah.
But because we didn't hit it in perfection, we relent on the whole goal. Or
Yeah.
somebody who made a decision to stop smoking and they went 30 days without smoking a cigarette. Evidently, people still do that. Cigarettes are still a thing.
Cigarettes are
But
still.
anyway, Yeah, so then you go 30 days without a cigarette, and then you have on your 31st day. Well, we know statistically if you have one, you're more likely to have another and then abandon the entire habit. But it's like, dude, you went from smoking a half a pack or a pack a day to one a month.
That's really good.
Yeah, that's incredible. But it's all about our framing and perspective, which comes back to being present and aware, which is why most people get punked, because they're not present and aware.
And that's one of the things that we're learning in the book, The Gap and the Gain. I mentioned that earlier, but it's exactly that. When you're operating in the gain, you're focused on the 3 days that you went to the gym and not the other 2 that you didn't.
Glass half full situation.
Which is awesome. And then as far as the gap, you're more so you're comparing yourself to the ideal, which is the 5 days,
Right.
as opposed to comparing yourself to your starting point, which was the 0.
Beautiful.
And there's so much more freedom in that, in operating in the gain. Like, you feel lighter, and it is more value based because you're focusing on what you have done. And
Yeah, it's progress over perfection. Right? You're looking at, hey, I may not be where I want to be, but I'm further along than I used to be. That's the key. And again, we need to teach more people to think like that and focus on the gain instead of what you haven't accomplished yet. And that's anytime I ever get really frustrated, that's part of my mechanism from getting recentered. Is like, okay, I may not be where I want to be, but I'm further along than I used to be. Right? Like, just keep fucking going. Just keep going. Don't give up.
And then to me, it's like reframing. Even though I haven't necessarily hit certain successes or milestones, I'm looking forward to getting there.
Yeah.
So it's all about that journey part too.
Yeah, anchoring to a future moment, I think, is important from a creativity standpoint and part of the spiritual aspect of creation. But learning how to be happy in the journey is where you have the necessary energy to create that world. So I deal with this a lot in the coaching side. Entrepreneurs are very often unhappy in process. So they have a vision about where they want to be, but they're not happy with where they're at. And the fundamental belief is very often, well, I'll be happy when. And it's almost as if, I think we learn this early in life, is very often, even with parents or people in our life, it's not uncommon for humans to punish other humans by withdrawing love to get them to do what we want them to do. So it's, in psychology, it's negative training or negative behavior training. So you take something away in order to drive behavior. And so I think potentially that gets embedded in the psyche, and then as we get older, we do the same things to ourselves. So I can't be happy now, because if I'm happy now, I won't have the drive to accomplish more in the future. When in fact, the actual answer to that is to find happiness in this moment, and you find the creative power necessary to create in the future.
yeah,
That woman is hugging a magazine with my face on it in a way that makes me feel
I want to
uncomfortable.
turn around.
It's very interesting. It's an interesting world.
I'm
we
trying to
live in.
catch the reflection, but
I see it.
which is funny too, because I was thinking about that recently, and I don't know if I was talking about it with you guys, but I don't know if you guys remember, last year I signed up for like training, and I only did I got a coach for 3 months, and I find myself just almost trying to rush through those 3 months, which is a weird thing to even
Just gotta get through this.
think about,
Just gotta
right?
get through this.
Yeah, I'm like, no, 3 months and I'm gonna see it. So there was a sense of chasing and just unhappiness in terms of where I was. And this time around, I shared with you guys, I signed up for my personal training again.
For how long?
But this time I did it for an entire year.
Yeah,
I
you
committed to an entire year.
Boom.
And the reason why I did that was because I remember how I felt in just that wanting to see results immediately, right? I only got 3 months to get this done. Where are the results? And this time I'm like, nope, I don't want to have that kind of mindset. I want to just enjoy the journey and have that patience with myself and be happy where I'm currently at and know I'm gonna get there. Because it's easier to want to rush for 3 months. A whole year, I'm like, I gotta really take my time.
Yep.
And so the psychology behind that
Yep.
was just so interesting. Now I feel more at peace and no, I'm just enjoying the journey and just finding myself being more consistent than I was the 3 months.
100%.
Yeah, and I love that. It's just a whole different feeling.
There's a principle that we teach there, which is slow is fast.
Yeah.
Right? It's surrendering to the journey, and again, it's progress over perfection, but it's the stability in doing that and finding happiness in the journey that you wake up one day and you're like, well, shit, I am where I want to be.
Yeah.
And it's a much more stable, consistent way of getting to your goals. So I love that. It's a great example.
Yeah. And the book also talks about that too. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm experiencing that in real life right now, which is really cool to see. Because it's just a different experience. I'm actually enjoying it a lot more than trying to rush and see results. It's like, no, if you keep being consistent, you're gonna see it. So just enjoy the journey while
Yes.
you're there.
And time is mostly an illusion. It's who we become in the process of our seeking our goals is ultimately what we're most proud of. And that's the development and growth. And it would be, I think, a pretty scary, at this level of consciousness anyway, it would be pretty scary if we got everything we wanted immediately. For a number of reasons, including we likely would not value it nearly the same because we're just not consciously able to do that.
Yeah.
Right? It's the things that we put work into and develop and commit to that ultimately become most valuable to us over time.
Yeah, that's true. Because I think that what this is doing for me too, it's not just establishing getting to the goal, but a lifestyle. Because it's literally having to figure it out for a whole year in a way that's sustainable for me to keep doing it even after the year's over. It's really establishing the habits and that consistency to make it something that's like, no, this is who I am because I'm doing it consistently, not just because I got there after 3 months, which I love.
I was
So
thinking about this in my own life. Saturday, I've been doing hit workouts for 10 years.
Wow.
10 freaking years. And I thought about it because I on Saturday when I went in, Saturday? I think it was Saturday. Scott Perry, shout out Scott Perry at Scott Perry Fitness. He's a good dude. But he was the one that got me into HIIT. And he was running the workout on that Saturday. And I thought about that. I was like, dude, I've been doing this with you for 10 years. Now, he's not always the guy that's running the classes anymore. But it's crazy to think about. I didn't realize it had been 10 years. It's just something a habit I picked up and I've been doing. And obviously it hasn't always been super intense, mostly intense, but there's seasons where I do it less or more. But it's a habit of doing it. And my body I like my body. I like how it feels. I like how it looks. Like, yeah, hell yeah. It's fun to be able to go into the gym and crush it. And everybody's like, what the fuck?
10 years.
10 years. And it's a habit over time.
Yeah.
Versus I want to now, like that mentality is, nowism is what I call it, as a religious fanatic, creates a lot of instability in the world when we want things so much that we're willing to do anything to get it now without paying the price or developing. Now, at a certain level of consciousness, that speeds up radically, but that's only because you're at a level of sustainability that you're not going to break the entire system over your wanton emotional needs. Think of like a child, right? A 2-year-old child. If they wanted everything, got everything they wanted in the moment, it's like, dear God. But there's a lot of humans that operate in that same way.
Right.
And so learning how to slow that down, I think, is really important.
You're saying that at some point it's okay. Can you explain? I don't think
At
I
a
got
certain
that last
level of
part.
consciousness, your ability to create almost an instantaneous speeds
Okay.
isn't a detriment to
Okay.
yourself and others, but it's because you're operating from a level of consciousness that is not egoic.
I see. Okay, I got it.
So the reason it's painful is if it's operating from need or lack, scarcity, right? That's all fear-based, very low levels of consciousness. You're not likely going to consider anything other than that need being met right now. That's what's pulling the decision, which means it has probably a much higher likelihood of being a detriment to the entire ecosystem out of your own personal need.
Got it.
Where at a certain level of consciousness, you have the power to change things radically, but it will most likely be for the most collective good. Like it's the reason or the desire is for the beneficial of all human beings, not just you. And that's the surrendering of, mostly surrendering of the ego, which ego is really only interested in itself. In fact, it can only see itself. So you can tell at the level of somebody's operating just by what their orientation is towards, right? And most people are only considering their decisions as they impact them. which is why I try teaching. Like, don't take things personal. At least 85% of the population isn't going to remember you 15 seconds later. Like, it wasn't about you. They weren't mistreating you. It wasn't something about you they didn't like. It's their ego interacting with them, which is the old expression, two egos will never meet. The reason is because an ego can never see anything other than itself, which is most of the human existence, until that changes.
Anything else on consistency?
So what does it come down to? Values and awareness?
What does consistency come down to?
Yeah, I think so. Values and awareness. Your priorities.
I think about like some of the apps that help with consistency now that I'm considering, for example, like Headspace, and I'm pretty sure that there's other ones as well.
Aura.
Yeah, that track, for example, like, oh, you're on a 2-day straight. Oh, I think it's that Bible app, actually. It's like, you've been, consistent for like 2 days. Like, don't break it. And I feel like that has helped too a lot with consistency. Because like, oh, I don't want to break this streak. Just being able to see that and be aware, which is kind of cool.
So that's another fundamental principle we try to teach from, which is don't fight human psychology, work with it. So more and more companies are figuring this out, and they're trying to gamify behavior, which is, in a sense, essentially tricking the person into doing the work. Because the reward mechanism.
Instant gratification
Right.
for that moment.
Right, yeah, you're tricking the mind into getting a gratification from the dopamine hit that's strong enough that continues to drive the behavior. I don't mind it. I think there's a lot of behaviors that can be done that way. It's very often not very conscious, but I think about the first kind of illustration of this that was super potent. President Obama was in office, Michelle Obama. Her whole 8 years was trying to get kids to go out and play, right? And spend, I think, Play 60 was part of her inspiration, which is a very admirable goal, right? That's something, the kids are less and less physically active, and I think it genuinely is a concern for a number of reasons. But I don't know how successful she was in moving the needle there while they were in office. But Niantic created a product called Pokemon Go and got kids and adults out and active overnight. Like literally did in an overnight what Michelle Obama statistically was not able to do in 8 years. Why? Simply gamified the behavior of going out and being active. So much so that they had to start posting warnings and saying things like, look around, don't walk off cliffs, don't walk into people's backyards. Like, people were getting crazy.
Look at the streets.
Like chasing Pokemon all over the frickin', including myself. I love the game.
Yeah.
But it drove behavior because there was a reward for the behavior, right? And that's it. So don't fight human psychology, work with it. Understand how to drive behavior in yourself and others, and then gamify it. Have fun with it. So one of the things I do, there is, this may or may not say things about myself. I find satisfaction and pleasure out of denying desire, if that makes sense. So,
The donuts.
like donuts.
Yes, sound
Right.
like donut scenario.
Donuts quite possibly are my favorite food in the world. If I had a favorite food, it's right up on. It's on a very short list of
I
things.
know, I
that are
love
like,
donuts.
what is not to like about a donut?
Right.
I love donuts.
Yeah.
I find great satisfaction in denying the desire to eat that donut. Right? And then what I'll do is I have a lust list, and I'll write down anything that I really want, but I'm like, not now. And I almost never tell myself not never. It's always not now. Which also has a potent, energetic, creative power to it, right? Not never, just not now. So you deny it, and then you put the lust list together, and then you can have a day. During football season, it's mostly on Sundays, because then it becomes an emotionally coping mechanism. It becomes a way to self-satisfy or soothe if necessary. But then I'll go through that list, and if there's anything on that list that I still desire, then it's like, fuck all. Let's have some fun.
That's awesome. That's great.
That's smart.
And then you can have fun with those things. And don't go too far with this. There are exceptions, but there's no, that's not true. on my particular list, there's generally not things on those lists that if I just indulge in for that moment in time, like that 2-hour span on a Sunday afternoon, that's gonna fuck up much of
Right.
anything, right? That's the key to it. As long as I can contain it to that space.
Yeah. But people see it as, I'll have it once, I can have it again.
Well,
and
that's-
again.
Or you know, you could do something that is not healthy. So, but yeah, it depends on the person. I don't have a problem saying no. So I have this, people who eat with me regularly will notice this, and people who like to eat off other people's plates usually love this. I almost always leave the last
I
bite.
was about to say that.
looking between you guys, I was like, is that cat?
No,
would.
I was about to say that because I
You
remember
enjoy it too.
when we would, like, in our early days, we would have Subway all of the time.
Yeah.
Like, all of the time. And you would always leave the last bite of
I would,
Subway, and it would drive me nuts.
Yeah.
I'm like, are you gonna? Yeah, I was like, why are you eating that? And then to your point, there were times I'm like, oh, thank God he didn't eat it because I'm gonna eat it.
Yeah, well, that's one of my ways of denying that, where it's like, I'm not stopping because there's literally nothing else to eat. I'm stopping because I'm done. Does that make sense?
You know, Charles actually does that a lot. And I'm always just like, you're not going to eat that. But I get that
Yeah.
so much because I enjoy food so much thoroughly.
It is a
actually, it's a
discipline.
really big love. And for me, like, I do it with all of you guys. I'm like, I'll take your food.
Yeah.
I'll take it. I enjoy it. I love it.
And that I also get pleasure out of that, where it's like, yes, have my last bite. Like,
I
I'm
will.
like, yeah.
I've never seen you leave the last bite of a donut, though.
Now,
at
he
the
eats
winery.
it covered in a corner, hiding.
I'd
He'll
like
eat
to
it.
see that.
Actually, I do more than it
Just kidding.
seems. But like that's I have a number of practices like that, but that's one that comes to mind where I call the limit, like I
Because you're
versus.
officially done. Like, if you're done, you're satisfied. There's a
Which-
point of no return.
Now, in some cultures, they would consider that disrespectful if you didn't clean the plate.
Yeah.
right? And I get that.
Yes.
And be all things, all people. If I was in that culture, I would probably honor, out of respect for, in whatever case, if it made cultural sense or relational sense to do it, I'm not going to fight over the last bite. Fine, I'll fucking eat it. So, somewhat depends on the situation. But there is a mental trick in learning to do that. And it's the same when I work out. And as I've gotten more into my workouts over the years, I've really taken to this more, which is Muhammad Ali, famously said when asked, how many sit-ups do you do? He said, I don't know because I don't start counting until it hurts. So for me, it's the inverse from not taking the last part of the donut or the last part of the meal. It's like I always make sure I get to a point where failure is on the table. Like where it's like I don't just do the reps. And so sometimes, depending on my weight, it may be less reps than what was assigned. I almost always go heavier or more intense. So, but the point is, it's to me the set was a waste. And don't take this too far because depending on what you're trying to do with your body and what your protocols are, there's different things to do here. But for me, it's the pushing myself to that place of being uncomfortable that makes the workout a win. So, and that's what I like about HIIT workouts because they're different every time, and I almost always walk out of them feeling like I'm gonna fucking die, right? And now I'm wearing a flak jacket, which has really upped my game.
What is that?
It's a heavy.
I get weight.
Oh, okay.
The military uses them to put body armor in, but you put weight in them. So now I'm on 30 pounds.
Nice.
So I add an
Damn.
extra 30 pounds to my workout. And I didn't wear it on Monday because it was not the kind of workout where it makes sense to do it, but I did some tread afterwards and I was like, wow, this is really easy when you
Easy.
don't have a 30-pound vest
Yeah.
on.
Nice.
But it's the inverse of the same thing. It's like you can train yourself to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And I have found so much pleasure and success in life comes from the ability to do that. And I realize, I think full circle, I've talked about this with you guys before in different ways, the people that I want closest to me are the people who generally are okay being uncomfortable. I don't do well with people who comfort is their number one,
Go
thing.
to.
Yeah, it's like they need to be comfortable. Like I really enjoy people who are cool being uncomfortable and like pushing into that for so many reasons. So that's like, I realize, when I think about my social circles, I generally stay away from people who are obsessed by their own personal comfort. It's like, it almost is like a, but I can understand, like I can empathize, like if they had a very destabilizing childhood, they may cling to comfort or security because they have trauma they got to process, or they've never been out of their fucking shell and have been pampered their entire life, so they're afraid. I can understand it, I just don't want anything to do with it. And that person probably wouldn't like being around me anyway because I'm going to be constantly
Annoying.
razzing that.
No, but yeah. I get that.
I don't like it. Nothing good happens there.
Yeah.
You die in your comfort zone. That wasn't a joke. Have you ever been in hospice? Everybody's in hospice. What's the number one goal of hospice?
To make them comfortable
Totally.
to die.
Correct.
Yep.
To make death passing comfortable, which is great when you're going to pass, I guess.
Yeah.
Although, even then, I'm thinking, like, if I could, a little less, if I'm going to tap out of the meat suit, I'm going to do it in some fantastic, glorious way.
With a flap jacket.
Maybe. I think nothing to me sounds glorious about dying in a bed.
Yep. Yeah.
Like, fuck, I'll go drop into on a mountain or do something crazy, and it's like, all right, if I'm on my way out anyway, let's like go to one on our fucking terms, not just laying in a bed like on morphine.
Yeah.
Like, wait, I'm out.
Very sad for everyone involved.
There's what?
I said it's very sad for everyone involved because it's kind of like you're sitting there waiting.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep. It's all very true. To recap this, a few things I would say: progress over perfection, gain over the gap. Right? Don't give up on yourself if you're not executing in perfection. 2, if you found yourself moving away from a habit or something that you were into for a long time, just ask yourself, what am I choosing to value more than doing this? That can be very useful. And then find ways to gamify the behavior you're looking for, to kind of trick your own psychology into some kind of reward system for doing it. And then for me, I would say find happiness in the journey. See it as a game. Have fun in the progress.
Yeah, Atomic Habits does a great job of breaking down with their like cheat sheet, and obviously through the entire book as well if you want to read the entire thing, but different ways to essentially gamify it. Like that ties into make it satisfying, and the example of Pokemon Go, like also make it invisible. It's not like people are going out to exercise, they're going out to play a game, but in that they're getting their exercise out of it, right? Make it obvious, make it visible in some cases.
Yep.
So that's a great book if you're trying to get into routine of stuff as well, on just some different tools to use.
And then just as a kind of context structure of consistency, you don't get there by focusing on consistency. You get there by doing the things that lead to consistency. Don't chase consistency, chase the things that lead to consistency, and then you'll find that you're far more consistent. And on a personal level, I love consistent people. Like that's again who I want in my world, is people that I know who the fuck I'm getting on a daily basis. It's much harder to develop and deal with people who are wildly inconsistent. You don't know what you're dealing with. It's hard to bet on them.